Hello and welcome back to the last installment of this particular note or lesson. The final example I want to talk about is interval data. In an earlier lesson, you learned how to take large quantities of data over a wide range and break it into intervals. So here we're looking at when data is arranged in intervals, we can approximate the mean. So the example, if you recall back, the example was with marks. All right, and there's other times that you'll come across the homework and when you'll do it. So the average, recall again that it all stems from the original definition of mean, and that was the sum of all the x values over how many there are. So now what we're looking at is the mean is equal to the sum of the frequency multiplied by x divided by the sum of our frequency. So it looks like that. So just a bit of a legend. So F is frequency. I'm going to step you through an example. And you can see with the spreadsheet technology, it makes it easier. It's just a matter of getting it set up. The only difference, and I'll put a star here, the X in this case represents the midpoint. Okay, so this X is our midpoint of the interval, because all we can really do is we can just approximate the mean when we're given an interval, because what we're doing is we're putting 20 or 30 pieces of data within a range, and we don't know, they could all be at the bottom end of the range, it could be at the top, so all we can really do is fire off an approximation. So again, the formula is just simply, we take frequency multiplied by the midpoint, we add them up, and then we divide by the sum of the frequency. So on to an example, and the final one here. 100 students wrote a university exam. So not uncommon to have 100 students in a class at university. Class results are shown below. Answer the following. I want to find mean and median. Mean and median. So explain why part A is simply an approximation. And I've already kind of talked about that in the previous discussion here. So again, I've already entered the information into QuattroPro. So I've taken the information from the textbook or the test or whatever you're going to be doing it, and I've got mark, I got number of students. So this is my frequency. All right. I need to find a midpoint. Midpoint. Oops. Point, and in brackets I'll put it's an x value. So midpoint, 91 to 100. So I'm just going to go back to the lesson for a second. So at first, the midpoint, and I'll just do it here to show you how it's done. Okay, your midpoint is from 91 to 100. So 91 to 100. So if we count it out, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100. There are 10 pieces of data in there. Okay, that means we need to go halfway or to find the midpoint. So midpoint is at 5, it is 5 away from bottom, 5 away from either end. Oops, I don't know what I'm trying to spell there. From either end. So that would mean 91, 92, 93, 94, 95 would be the first midpoint. All right, so that would be halfway in between. Okay, if you count it off, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100. So we have actually 91.5 would be the midpoint, because we need to have an equal number of pieces of data above and below. So here's the shortcut, and this is what I always tell people. If you're not confident with this, and you just saw I made a simple mistake there, shortcut is to add lower plus upper and divide it by 2. So in our case, 91 plus 100 over 2, so that would be 191 over 2. So it would be halfway in between. When you do the math here, you end up with the 95.5. Once you get the first or one of the midpoints, the rest of them are a pattern, because this is why we set intervals up to be the exact same size in each case. So that means going down, we would have 85.5, 75.5. All right. So it doesn't, the reason for intervals ties into later information on why we do things a certain way. So returning back to the spreadsheet, now that we got the midpoint figured out, so I could do it here, and you can do this yourself. When you do it, 91 plus 100, and I should do that in brackets so it knows that I want you to add that first. Bracket, divide by 2. There it is, 95.5. So the pattern then is 85.5. And if you want to get fancy here, you see that they're just subtracting 10. So what I could say is equals the previous one, take away 10. Hey, there's 75.5. So there's a whole bunch of shortcuts that you can do with the spreadsheet software as you get better and better. So there we go. Midpoints are done. So going back to the formula. We now know the midpoint. We need to find f times x. So that's the next stage in the process. So frequency multiplied by our x value, or midpoint. So that's going to equal frequency's number of students multiplied by the midpoint that we just calculated. We hit enter, and there's our formula. So we copy it, and we paste it all the way down. Going back to the formula, which you want to have on a spreadsheet. Okay, again, you want to make sure this makes it onto your spreadsheet, or sorry, your cheat sheet, so that when you go to use the spreadsheet, you know what the formula is. So now we got to find the sum. We got to add up all the f times x's. So going back to Quattro, I want to find the sum of this. So ampersand sum, bracket, and find the sum of that column, bracket. So 7,099. Formula again, I need the sum of the frequency. So going back to here, I'm looking for the sum of my frequency. Frequency is your tallies, or how many of each in each interval. So there's 98. So that means that mean is equal to 7,099 divided by your frequency. And we get 72.4. All right, so going back, 7,099. So just going back and forth here. I know that for A part, my mean, or x bar, is equal to 7,099 divided by, and going back, 98, and we get 72.4. 98, oops, confusing my smartboard, 98, and we get 72.4%. So there's mean. So therefore, mean is 72.4%. Now, how do you calculate the median? How do you calculate the median? Well, I know that there is, and do it below here, median. So I know there's 98 pieces of data. So 98 pieces of data, if I cut that in half, 98 divided by 2, we end up with 46. 46. So that means that it splits into equal groups. There's 46 on the bottom half, and there'll be 46 on the top half. So the median, there's 46 pieces of data on this side, 46 on that side. So what we're going to have to do is we need to find 46 and 47 and take the average. Okay? Anytime you have an even number of data, and this is from earlier, anytime the number of data is even, the median is going to be the average of the middle two. So going up here, the nice thing with interval data, it's in order. So if I add 12 and 18, that gives me 30. If I add another 28 to that, now I'm at 58. So I'm just adding up as I go. So that means that the 46th and 47th piece of data is in here. Okay? This is where it's located in here. Because 12 and 18 gave me 30. So when I went up and added that next grouping, 46 and 47 fall in here because it's between 30 and 58. So what does that mean for median? Your median is 75.5. It's the actual midpoint. So there we go. So therefore, median is the 75.5%. All right, so there's question A answered. So we're dealing with data in a different form, but the actual formula and process is very, very similar. So B part, explain why part A is simply an approximation. And we talked about that on the previous slide here. So B part, it is an approximation because the midpoint is an average of the interval. The interval and not the data. So for example, if the data, let's look at the, 51 to 60 range. What happens if the data in there was 51, 51, 51, 51, 58, 58? Okay? We can see that we're looking at the average of this is not going to be 75.5 because most of our data is occurring at the low end of the interval. Okay, or even more, to make it even more apparent, and we don't know this. Okay, same thing, it could be all 51s. Every piece of information in that interval could be 51. So we're actually averaging it out to a low. So we're just making an approximation, and we hope the data in each interval balances. That's all you can really do, unless you have the raw data. Okay, so if you're given a frequency table that has it in interval form, the best you can do with it is come up with an approximation. Usually the approximation's fairly close, especially when you're dealing with frequency tables. Usually are very, very, very large amounts of data when you're doing interval data, so keep that in mind. All right. That brings us to the end. Here is your homework. Whoops, I lost it. It just slid off the board. There we go. There's the homework for this particular section. Make sure you're using your spreadsheet software, practicing with that, because it's very important you're comfortable with it. I'd sooner you come out with a practical skill like that. So anyhow, good luck. If you have any questions, let me know.